Let's get on that story then. Reports by the Parliament Budget Office, as the PBO, now indicate that banks selected under the scheme to see to the increased lending to the MSME sector only loaned out paltry sums between October last year and April 2021. Now, the lenders were seen to be hard pressed by the uncertainties of COVID-19, which, according to a majority of the lenders, increased the risk ratio in the sector. Even with government assurance that a ratio of defaulted loans will be covered, small and medium enterprises loans requests are still getting rejected, with the sector seen as the biggest contributor to the 14% of their total non-performing loan book. Now, the scheme, created in October 2020, has only seen the disbursement of 296.4 million worth of loans as of the end of April 2021, which pointed to a low adoption of the scheme by the banks. Now, over 90% of the private sector constitutes micro, small, and medium enterprises. However, the proportion of the MSME loan portfolio to the total banking sector loan book stands at 20.9%. That's so little. All right, let's talk about that trend for private sector credit growth. And it was saying, indeed, that's what we were. That's not bad. That's the figure that we're closing at of as of December 2020, which was confirmed again by the KNBS Economic Survey report. If you look at it, we're doing at about 2.8 trillion. Now, crossover again to the next part. You're going to say that indeed, when it comes to as a percentage, one thing is going to stand out. We are still below that magic double digit. We're still talking about a single digit. In fact, as of 2020, we closed at 8.4%. Now, let's look at where the banks are in terms of performance. And you will see, indeed, out of the gross loans that were then extended to the economy, you will see that a paltry of that, an equal 296 million only, is what went to the private sector in the country. The same thing we're going to say in terms of the non-performing loan book. We cost at just 14%, going by those figures that we have for you this morning. Melody, let me begin with you again. A guarantee scheme that goes through a bank, and a bank is the one that does due diligence on who should get it or not. A bank is in business. They have their criteria, and we're still calling this a guarantee fund. Melody, is it, if it is a guarantee fund from the government?
Well, I would say it still is, because one avenue to provide this credit. So it's basically an insurance that gives the lenders the confidence to extend credit to otherwise high risk. But as we saw, because of the COVID, banks have been more aligned, giving more than to funding the SMEs.
Yes, pretty much.
So it's fund, however, the banks are just being used as an avenue.
The banks are getting used as an avenue. Then, Melody, the question comes, and that's the $1 million question. If you want these MSMEs to get this credit, should you not find an alternative to the banks if indeed you're going to take care of a ratio of the non-performing loans?
Well, I think there are other methods that the government can use to unlock this lending to the private. One would be just investing in financial literacy.
Yes.
Because banks require financial plans. SMEs don't really have the capacity to prepare these plans, and you find that these SMEs miss out on credit because of these factors. There's also the factor of collateral.
Yes.
Mostly banks would look at SMEs because of the collaterals. They lack collaterals rather. However, I think if the government is a bit more flexible with collateral laws, like maybe recognizing non-fixed collaterals like things like tools, I think it can also help increase access to loans.
Yes, pretty much. All right, Josh, let me get your sentiment on that. Josh, we're still below the double-digit figure that we've been fighting for years now, just to make sure that there's credit from the banking and financial services sector in the country to the MSME sector. But then they came up with a guarantee scheme. Good idea. But then they took it through the banks. Is that not the biggest undoing from the government then, Joash?
I mean, let's look at how proper guarantee scheme. I think the biggest guarantee scheme we have for the MSME sector is in South Korea, the Korea MSME guarantee scheme.
Yes.
Formed in 1976. It's about 40 years old. How that scheme operates basically is it says, this here is a promising MSME, but they don't have collateral. So we are going to guarantee the collateral on their behalf. Now, the scheme that the Kenya government introduced is just slightly less complex than that, because we don't have that exists where that guarantee will come from. So say I borrow from the bank, missing MSME, but since I didn't have collateral, if I'm an asset. So that at that today, this guy hasn't paid, you guaranteed his loan, now pay us. Even in countries where guarantee schemes work very well, there are usually two challenges.
Yes.
Number one, there are certain segments in that are too risky. The risk appetite is too high for the loans are not made. Now higher than the risk profile, the borrower doesn't take the loan. So those are the two gaps where credit schemes don't work. And those gaps exist in Kenya as well. However, in Kenya, that problem is further exacerbated by the fact that we have a government that has a very high borrowing appetite. So as a bank, if you are doing your risk profile, I mean, this is a government that's borrowing upwards of 50 billion every month. So as a bank, if you, I mean, it guarantee or not, you would still make more money with less transaction costs, with less risk if you lend to government. And that being said, Simba, this is from a perspective, one of those credit guarantee fund, SMEs now come and borrow. Yes. But the banks guys and they say, against the backdrop of COVID, this client is too risky, even if is in this loan. But it also speaks to what they feel is the ability of government to guarantee the loans.
Yes, but Joash, does that not negate it then? When you're saying, well, a bank will say, well, this particular client is quite risky, or this particular sector is quite risky, so because you gave us the ability to manage your scheme, we think we should hold on to it. But the government knows very well that this specific sector is risky. That's why they come up with that scheme. Because the other business players in that field, the banks themselves, are the ones in the first place who do not want to extend credit to the private sector.
You see, banks are in the business of making loans.
Yes.
In other economies, they don't have an alternative. In other economies where the appetite for public borrowing is not so high,
yes,
such a scheme works. But in Kenya, because the borrowing appetite, I mean, the government has basically crowded out the private sector from.
Yes.
From the. Now, importantly, when you look at doing and you're trying to get to a point where there is a functional credit guarantee scheme for MSMEs, the credit guarantee scheme is only one of 9 interventions that need to happen for that sector to grow. Other interventions would include things, startup hubs, education schemes, as Melody mentioned, financial literacy. So you have to do at least 9 steps before you get credit guarantee scheme.
Yes.
So we just jumped to a credit guarantee scheme, and it's not going to work because we haven't done the groundwork, we haven't laid the groundwork for it to be functional.
Let me cross over to Chacha before I bring in Tommy Randall. Chacha, you're the one who's a bit, well, skeptical about calling this a guarantee scheme if it's going to go through the banks as well. Can you give your sentiment on this and sort of give a proposal on what can unlock lending to the private sector in the country?
Yes, this credit scheme is not actually fully guarantee scheme that can benefit Kenyans.
Yes.
Because one of the main things that is affecting Kenyans is lack of information on what required for one to qualify for the so-called the credit guarantee scheme. Kenyans think the guarantee scheme, these are the free loans given actually which do not even attract interest as that. So, in terms lack of information, financial literacy, many MSMEs not, for example, to qualify. And as we have already said previously, majority of the MSMEs are unlicensed, they are unregistered. Why? They meet the basic conditions for them to be registered and for credit facilities. And as such, now to unlock this, the government first needs to maybe levelize the ground, loosen the conditions that are required for majority of the MSMEs to be registered, so that when we have a number of them on board, actually licensed, then be given basic financial literacy on how they facilities. This is free money. This money comes with conditions. There is some sort of loan or interest that the money accrues, which is not too high. Therefore, the money needs to be managed well, and they invested or put in a business that is going to earn income every month. So with that, okay, Kenyans don't take it to be each example loan being given without maybe in touch information literacy very crucial for the success of these financing facilities.
Pretty much. Tommy Brendo, clear the conversation this morning on that specific area. You said it is a guarantee scheme, but then Tommy Brendo, the banks are still saying no to the private sector. You can see that. I mean, 296.4 million, just that from April to October. It just shows you that we do not really want to give the private sector this credit. What can unlock it, Tommy Brendo? And why do you think that this is still, in black and white times, a guarantee scheme?
I think maybe loosening would help it more, because at this, the way things look, it's not worth this risk, even if it's not worth for the banks to take this risk, even if the loan is guaranteed.
Yes.
It's too much of a headache. Plus, it would require the bank to actually do the work of informing people, bringing them up to speed on requirements and things of that nature. To them, it is not worth their time for them to do something else and just say no.
Pretty much. All right, let's cross on to the last one, and briefly, we do know where the country stands. Now, the latest Central Bank of Kenya data indicates that the ratio of public debt to GDP declined from 64.1% in June 2003 to 38.1% in June 2012, but then increased thereafter, driven largely by spending on infrastructure and more recently COVID-19 related spending. While presenting to the Senate Committee on Finance and Budget, the Central Bank of Kenya, Dr. Patrick Njoroge, indicated that from June of 2013 to December 2020, Kenya has accumulated 5.45 trillion in debt, which is 6 times more than the debt accumulated under 3 previous administrations, covering years from independence in 1963 to the end of 2012. The CBK report further indicated that the external debt service to revenue ratio declined 20.8% in June 2000 to 4.3% in June 2013, then rose to a high of 21.4% in June 2019 on account of a one-off USD 750 million euro bond repayment. While also presenting to that committee, it indicated that SGR is one of the latest setbacks in Kenya's external debt repayments, accounting to about 11%. All right, Let's look at SGR, because that's where the talking point is. We do know exactly what the debt trend has been in the country all the way from 2018 to 2020. We've seen exactly how much they're bringing in, but the conversation point is they are still not cutting even across the board. You can see passenger revenue, which was heavily affected again in 2020, but we do have news that they're also recovering in 2021 for the first 6 months. Let's cross over to the next data set this morning in terms of domestic debt and foreign debt interest repayments. You can see from 2015 to 2019 and 2020 financial year, always on the rise. All right, let's cross over the next one. From 2015 again, Kenya's debt to China, 2016, 2017, 2018, 2019, we can go on, has been rising as well. Again, same thing as well when it comes to outstanding debt to China. You're going to see indeed that cuts across the board as well. Melody, SGR. It's a pain for Kenya because we've accounted for 11% of external debt repayment and it's not cutting even. Dr. Patrick Njoroge was quite open to them, saying that this is your biggest pain now, because if you're going to pay 11% of the external debt to China on SGR, then there is a problem there.
Yes, it is. On kind of a high percentage of your debt. I think that's a very big risk factor. But I think that the debts that relating it's to a level going to become unsustainable, as CBK has said, we are in risk of default in the next 2 years.
Yes, that's what it is. All right, let me cross over to Josh this morning. Josh, 11% going out to just SGR and CBK, as you can hear Melody saying, if this continues, then we are at risk of defaulting. But then we have the latest rebates, Josh, that are at what? More than 500 billion into the economy, meaning we can still go out and get an extra 990 B in debt. That's what it means. So we're still at risk of defaulting in light of the latest rebates.
First of all, let me say the biggest lie told by the Jubilee government was that the SGR would pay for itself.
Yes.
Clearly, it's not going to pay for itself, and that's a problem. Secondly, I mean, when you're looking at the rebates, and I think why the rebates was delayed, I mean, the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics took very long to release the data, and the reason they did it is so that they can use that to raise the debt ceiling in Parliament. I think that will be a big mistake. The thing I like about Njoroge's presentation to the Senate is, for once, we have a honcho in our financial sector admitting problem. Even as he's admitting there is a, in terms of giving solutions, is a one or to public. Just yesterday, we were supposed to do Mombasa to Nairobi, and contractor says is not willing to do that. He'd rather the borrow paid him. The issue is that we should, but we can't look for those we always. We can't access that cheaper debt anymore because expensive commercial risk, commercial debt, and we are in this precarious position. So there are very few lenders who would be willing to lend to us cheaply. So I think we're at, I think my biggest takeaway is, for once, someone in government is admitting that there is a problem. This debt is not sustainable. It is terrible. We are at a point where whoever takes over government next year will only be servicing debt and paying recurrent expenditure, nothing more.
Like the way...
Because we don't have the funds to do that. Mind you, the Eurobond...
Yes.
The Eurobond is poor. So it's not about to get better. When the Eurobond... even bigger problem.
It's about not to get better. CHACHA, come in quickly on that as we clear this conversation. Is it a problem? And look at the timeliness of this warning from the CBK. It looks like Dr. Patrick Njoroge, because he's doing his last time anyway, has to tell the government the truth on where we are in terms of our debt trend.
Yes, indeed. The report by the CPK governor is the facts there that the country's debt is unsustainable for the fourth year. So as we have noted that SGR being one of the consumers of the external debt that we have from China, and since that the SGR costs were inflated, and for example, China is not going to that it will have a ripple effect on economy. For example, in terms of the infra, in terms of managing the skyrocket bill. So the CPK governor has done a good thing, and it's advisory that the debt is getting more and more unsustainable, and a lot needs to be here in terms of maybe seeing our quest for external debt and looking for maybe internal sources of the revenue, and also reducing wastage in government in terms of maybe corruption and other mismanagement of finances. CPK is actually doing well, pretty well. I wish that now the government will take a cue and stop not to go for more external debt as in infrastructure in Kenya.
Pretty much. Tommy Randall, clear this conversation. 11% going out to SGR, and there's a warning that if this trend continues, then Kenya might be defaulting in the next 2 years.
The last loan we got from IMF for COVID came with some stringent requirements.
Yes.
We might need to go beyond that to actually meet our fiscal responsibilities. And I also do the CBK for this report. It was 22 pages, so everybody, all those 67, able to comprehend and do a better job so that we don't get to this economic point which we are at.
Pretty much. There's no better way to end that conversation this morning. We shall be keeping a tabs on that and continue to give you all that. You can take them all the way back to the time that they came to the studio this morning at Metropole TV KE across all your social media platforms. On YouTube, Metropole TV Kenya. Once you're there, we do appreciate if you can subscribe and leave a comment for us as well. Good morning. My name is Simba Elijah Charles Kiage.